She was tired of the city, the endless noise, the honking cars, the smell of smoke that lingered in every corner of her apartment. Every day felt like an echo of the one before. Rush to work, drown in screens, sip bitter coffee, and fall asleep to the hum of traffic outside her window. There was no silence, no pause, no space to breathe. Lena hardly had lived in the city for 10 years. It had once thrilled her, the promise of ambition, of ardent people and movement. But now, at 32, she found herself craving something else entirely. A quiet she'd never known. A place where time didn't run, but walked. The decision came suddenly, one night when she found herself staring out her apartment window at the flickering neon lights below. Her reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed, almost like a stranger's. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like static in her brain. She turned away, packed a bag, and booked a one-way ticket to nowhere in particular. 2 weeks later, she was driving down a winding dirt road deep in the countryside of Montana. The air was crisp and clean, the kind that made her lungs ache in a good way. Pine trees stretched endlessly along the roadside, their branches heavy with needles, their scent like a memory of something pure. She had rented an old house she'd found online, a cabin, really, but large enough to hold the quiet she was looking for. The listing had been simple: 3 bedrooms, surrounded by forest. No neighbors for miles. It was exactly what she wanted. When she arrived, the late afternoon sun was dipping behind the trees, painting the world in gold. The house stood at the edge of a clearing, its wooden frame weathered by time but sturdy. The porch creaked beneath her boots as she stepped up and turned the key. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and dust. The floors were uneven, the furniture mismatched, but the fireplace was grand, a stone hearth that reached almost to the ceiling. She set her bags down, walked to the window, and looked out. No cars. No people. Just the slow movement of wind through the trees. That first night, she sat on the porch with a blanket and a cup of tea. The stars came out like she had never seen before, sharp and infinite. She realized then that she couldn't remember the last time she'd seen the Milky Way. The silence wasn't heavy. It was alive, full of soft sounds, crickets, owls, the rustle of leaves. It felt like the world was breathing again, and she with it. Days turned into a slow rhythm. She woke with the sun, made breakfast, read by the fire, took long walks through the woods. Sometimes she painted. Sometimes she just sat outside and watched the light change across the trees. There was peace in the simplicity, in the absence of rush. But as the weeks passed, she began to feel something else too. The forest around her wasn't just quiet, it was aware. At night, she would sometimes hear the faint crunch of footsteps in the distance. Once, she swore she saw a shadow moving between the trees. But when she looked again, there was nothing. It didn't scare her, exactly. It intrigued her. There was an old, wild energy in this place. One evening, while walking along a narrow trail, she found an old wooden fence, half collapsed and covered in moss. Beyond it lay what seemed to be the remains of another house, stone walls, a chimney, and a doorway that opened to nothing but sky. She stepped closer, brushing away vines from the stones. In the middle of what had once been the living room, a small carving was etched into the floor, a circle with lines radiating outward like a sun. She ran her fingers over it, wondering who had lived here before her, what lives had played out in this quiet corner of the world. That night, the wind rose. It howled through the trees, rattling the windows of her cabin. The power flickered and went out, plunging everything into darkness. She lit a candle and sat by the fireplace, trying to read, but the pages shook in her hands. She could feel the forest pressing close against the house, as if listening. Then came the knock. It was soft, barely audible over the storm, but it was there. Once, twice, 3 times. She froze. Who could possibly be out here? Hello, she called. Her voice sounded small. No answer. She opened the door slowly, candlelight trembling. But there was no one there, just rain, the whisper of wind, and the dark line of trees. She closed the door, locked it, and laughed nervously to herself. Probably just a branch hitting the wood, she thought. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, had been standing there, just beyond the porch. The next morning, the world was calm again. Mist curled through the trees like smoke. She stepped outside, and there, on the porch railing, was a single feather, gray, long, and smooth as silk. It looked too perfect to have just fallen there. She picked it up, ran her thumb along it, and tucked it into her journal. The days that followed grew stranger in subtle ways. She would wake to find her front gate open when she was sure she had closed it. Once, she found fresh footprints in the mud leading toward the woods. They were human, but not hers. Despite the unease, she felt drawn deeper into the forest. It was as if the land itself was speaking to her, in whispers of leaves and the language of wind. She started following old trails, collecting stones, feathers, and bits of bark. Her dreams began to fill with images of firelight, shadows dancing on cabin walls, and the sound of laughter echoing through the trees. One evening, as twilight fell, she found herself returning to the ruins of the old house. The air was still, heavy with the scent of pine. She sat on one of the stones and closed her eyes. "Who were you?" she whispered. When she opened her eyes, she thought she saw movement, just a flicker, by the doorway. A shape, like a woman's figure, standing there and watching her. Lena blinked, and the figure was gone. But she felt something then, deep inside, not fear, but connection. As though she wasn't alone in her search for peace. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed the forest, muting every sound. The isolation that had once soothed her now felt sharper. There were nights when she would wake to the crack of ice on the roof, her breath visible in the cold air. But she stayed. She couldn't leave now, not when the land itself felt like part of her. She spent the cold months writing, painting, learning the rhythm of the wild. She painted the old ruin often, but always with a faint outline of the woman she'd seen, a ghost of memory, perhaps. One day, while chopping wood behind the house, she heard a voice. "Cold winter, isn't it?" She spun around. A man stood at the edge of the clearing, tall and bundled in a heavy coat, his breath fogging in the air. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said quickly, raising his hands. "Name's Caleb. I've got the next property over, about 3 miles that way." He pointed through the trees. She blinked in surprise. "I didn't think there were any neighbors." "Most don't," he said with a smile. "Not many people stay long enough to find out." They talked for a while, his presence oddly grounding. He told her he'd grown up here, that his family had lived in these woods for generations. When she mentioned the ruins she'd found, his eyes darkened. "That place," he said quietly. "That was the old Winstead house. Burned down near 50 years ago. Folks said it was haunted, though I think that's just stories. A family lived there, husband, wife, daughter. Fire took them all." Lena felt a chill. "The carving on the floor, what does it mean?" He shrugged. "Old symbol. Protection, maybe. Or calling. Hard to say." After he left, she couldn't stop thinking about the story. The ruins. The woman in her dream. The feather. It all seemed connected somehow. One night, near the end of winter, she returned to the ruins once more. The snow glowed blue under the moonlight. She knelt by the carved sun in the stone, brushing away frost. "I don't know what you're trying to tell me," she whispered, "but I'm listening." For a moment, the wind stopped. The forest went utterly still. Then, from the trees, came a faint light, soft, flickering, like the flame of a candle. It drifted toward her, glowing with a warmth that pierced the cold. She didn't move. She only watched as it floated above the carving, then slowly faded into the sky. She stayed there until dawn, the silence wrapping around her like a blanket. When spring came, the snow melted and the forest bloomed again. Lena no longer felt restless. The unease that had followed her had turned into something else, a deep calm, a sense of belonging. She wrote in her journal every day, not about the city she had left, but about the life she had found, the rhythm of birds, the dance of light, the whisper of the woods. Sometimes, she still walked to the ruins. She would sit on the stones and feel the sunlight on her face. Once, she thought she heard laughter again, soft and distant, like an echo from another time. But this time, she smiled. The city had taken her voice, but the wild had given it back. She was no longer running from her life. She was living it, deep in the quiet heart of the world. And at night, when the stars came out and the forest breathed around her, she knew she had found what she'd been searching for all along. Peace, not in silence, but in the living pulse of the wild.